In the cold darkness of the Perseid expanse, where light from stars barely touched the shattered remains of forgotten worlds, a weak signal whispered into space, an ancient flickering plea for help. The Valari, once a graceful and wise race, had almost vanished, scattered across the galaxy like dust in the wind after centuries of silence. Their final message traveled alone through the void until it reached an orbiting relay station near Jupiter, where an officer on duty, yawning in a quiet control room, suddenly sat up straight as a long-dead language echoed through the speakers. The signal was forwarded to Earth, and within hours, it reached the hands of Commander Elena Rourke, a decorated officer of the UNISF and captain of the exploration vessel Dauntless. Rourke was known for listening more to her conscience than her orders, and as she replayed the strange, sorrowful message over and over, she felt something stir within her, a quiet sense that history was knocking. The Valari spoke of a dying colony, of silence, of fear, and of a coming shadow that none could stand against. Earth's leaders responded with cautious neutrality, stating that the message was likely a remnant of a long-lost war and not humanity's concern. But Rourke disagreed. She requested clearance to investigate, and when denied, she filed a mission under a different classification and ordered her crew to prepare for deep space travel. The Dauntless launched quietly from orbit, a silver spear, aimed at the edge of the map, carrying with it not just fuel and supplies, but a question humanity had rarely asked. What do we owe to those who are not like us? After weeks of silent travel through dark and uncharted sectors, the Dauntless finally reached the coordinates embedded in the Valari transmission. There, circling a cracked and lifeless moon, was a station, a relic made of pale silver and blue light, barely clinging to life. The structure drifted unevenly, its energy flickering like a dying candle. No response came from Hales. Rourke made the call to dock. Her away team moved through cold airlocks and silent halls, where walls bore unfamiliar symbols and the floors creaked with age. Then they found them, 12 Valari, thin and graceful, eyes glowing faintly like the last embers of a fire. Their leader, Varel, looked at Rourke not with fear, but with a quiet hope, as if her arrival had been foretold. The Valari explained how long ago they had been the center of a peaceful confederation of worlds, teachers and diplomats among the stars. But then the Karnax came, brutal and cold, machines wrapped in flesh, who destroyed not for survival, but for domination. The Valari fought, but their empathy made them slow to strike, and their beauty made them targets. Colony after colony fell. Allies vanished. The galaxy moved on, forgetting them, and now only fragments remained. Rourke listened, and something about Varel's voice, the way it didn't beg but remembered, made her heart twist. She offered medical help and began repairs to the station, against orders from Earth. Her crew, seasoned and loyal, followed without hesitation, even when they all knew they were now stepping into a shadowed corner of history. As engineers worked, they detected movement on the long-range scanner, a Karnax vessel, black and sharp as a knife, moving toward their position. Rourke ordered the station to full lockdown and recalled the crew to the Dauntless. She contacted Earth again, but this time the response was curt. Observe, but do not engage. The Karnax were too powerful, and Earth had no stake in an old war. But Rourke had already made up her mind. She would not leave the Valari to be hunted again. She studied the Dauntless's systems, prepared emergency maneuvers, and positioned the ship between the station and the incoming vessel. Her crew watched her closely, waiting for the command, ready to fight not for Earth, but for what was right. As the Karnax ship entered visual range, its captain transmitted a cold message demanding the surrender of the Valari. Rourke stepped forward on the comms and answered simply, "No." The Karnax responded by powering up their weapons. The Dauntless, though smaller, was faster, and when the Karnax fired a warning shot, Rourke dodged it with a sudden burst of speed. Her ship danced like a leaf in the wind, drawing the enemy fire away from the station. Her gunners struck only when necessary, disabling weapons without destroying the Karnax outright, knowing that a kill would trigger war. After a tense exchange, the Karnax ship limped away into the void and silence returned. Back on the station, the Valari wept. not out of sadness, but out of disbelief. No one had stood beside them for centuries. They shared old data cores with Rourke's team, revealing the locations of other scattered colonies, some possibly still alive. Virel took Rourke to a chamber deep within the station, where walls shimmered with star maps encoded in living light, and he pointed to a series of coordinates, whispering of ruins and voices lost to time. Rourke turned to her crew and said, "We go next." As the Dauntless prepared to jump to the next system, the crew didn't speak of fear or politics. They spoke of honor, and of the moment they realized that being human wasn't about power, it was about choice. And in that moment, they had chosen to fight beside the forgotten. Behind them, the Valari station glowed a little brighter, no longer just a ghost in the dark, but a spark at the edge of a new beginning. The jungle moon of Theraxis hung in the black sky like an emerald marble, its surface glowing with strange, green lights, flickering between the clouds of mist that coiled through the towering trees below. The Dauntless dropped out of warp just above its orbit, silent and cautious, its hull still bearing the scars of the Karnax encounter days earlier. Commander Elena Rourke stood on the bridge, eyes locked on the readings pouring across the monitors. Life, signs, faint and scattered, matching the Valari biosignature stored in the ship's logs. The coordinates Virel had given her were real, and this place, this wild, living world, might be one of the last homes of his people. Rourke leaned forward, her voice calm but tense as she ordered a landing team to prepare. As the shuttle descended, through thick clouds, electrical storms flared in the distance, lighting up the alien jungle in short, sharp flashes of color. The surface came into view, a sea of giant vines, thick blue leaves, and glowing fungi stretching for miles. The team, equipped with biosuits and scanners, touched down in a clearing near what appeared to be ruins, half swallowed by the jungle. No welcome, no sign of civilization. But the air buzzed with tension, like something unseen was watching from the shadows. Rourke led the team forward, stepping through broken stone arches covered in moss and symbols that pulsed with weak light. Suddenly, movement, a shimmer of energy behind the trees, a quiet hum, and then a figure stepped out, tall, thin, skin pale like moonlight, with eyes glowing softly, a spear in one hand and the other raised to signal peace. The Valari survivor stood still, as if unsure whether the humans were real or just another trick of memory. Rourke lowered her weapon and spoke gently, repeating phrases Virel had taught her. The alien's expression shifted from caution to wonder. More Valari appeared, emerging slowly from the jungle shadows, young and old, some injured, all worn from years of hiding. Their leader, a woman named Sorel, approached, her voice smooth but edged with years of fear. She explained that they had remained hidden since the last Karnax purge, living in silence and burying their dead beneath the glowing roots of the jungle. They had long believed they were the last. When Rourke told her of Virel, of the station, of the battle against the Karnax ship, Sorel wept openly, the first time in decades, and took Rourke's hand with trembling fingers. But before the moment could settle, the ground shook. Loud crashes from the north, not natural. Something mechanical, moving fast, cutting through the forest. Drones, Karnax scavengers. They had followed the signal. Rourke realized too late. The Dauntless had attracted them. Sorel's people scattered, vanishing into the jungle with practiced grace. Rourke ordered her team to set up a perimeter and called for reinforcements from the ship. Within minutes, silver-bodied machines with red scanning eyes appeared through the trees, carving paths through the thick undergrowth with saw-like limbs. The human squad opened fire with precision, dropping the first wave quickly, but more poured in, moving in eerie silence. Rourke fought beside her team, ducking behind broken stone and using stun bursts to knock the drones offline. The Valari returned, wielding energy spears and strange pulse weapons that glowed with the same blue light as their ancient ruins. Together, human and alien defended the temple ground, back to back. In the center of the ruins, Sorel activated an old control panel that hummed to life, sending out a harmonic pulse that disrupted the drone's programming. The machines froze mid-attack, sparking, twitching, then falling to the ground like broken toys. For a long moment, there was only the sound of wind and distant thunder. Rourke breathed heavily, scanning the area for more threats. There were none. The survivors gathered again, this time with eyes filled not only with relief, but with curiosity and hope. Sorel took the humans deeper into the ruins, where they showed the Chamber of Memory, a room filled with floating crystals that recorded voices, songs, and visions from Valari history. Rourke watched as holograms danced around her, scenes of peace, cities of light, children laughing. She saw what the Valari had once been, and what had been lost. Sorel placed one of the memory crystals in Rourke's hand and said it belonged with her now. Humanity's choice to help had rewritten their legacy. Back aboard the Dauntless, Rourke sent a coded message to Earth with evidence of the Karnax drones attacking civilians and records from the Valari temple showing centuries of suffering. But she didn't wait for a response. Instead, she began planning the next journey. Varel had mentioned more colonies, hidden in debris fields, asteroid sanctuaries, and even gas giants. Each could hold more survivors, more pieces of the puzzle. As the Dauntless left the orbit of Theraxis, Sorel and a small group of Valari joined the ship, the first ambassadors of their people in 100 years. They stood beside the crew on the observation deck, watching their jungle moon grow smaller in the distance. And for the first time, they were not alone. But even as they celebrated the reunion, deep in the Karnax command core, alarms began to flash. One of their patrols had gone silent. Records of human ship signatures were detected in a restricted sector. A massive fleet, still sleeping in the dark, began to stir. The war, long buried beneath forgotten stars, was about to awaken once more. And this time, humanity was no longer an outsider. They were a threat. A choice had been made, and across the stars, the Karnax prepared to answer it. The void between stars was quiet. Too quiet for Commander Elena Rourke's liking as the Dauntless drifted through Sector 9 Tau, escorting Sorel and the Valari refugees toward a safer location. The jungle moon of Theraxis was now far behind them, but the memory of the Karnax drones and their sudden attack had left the entire crew uneasy. Every scan, every flicker on the radar made tension rise. Rourke stood on the bridge, watching the endless black stretch before her, broken only by the cold light of distant stars. Her ship, though not built for war, now carried survivors, secrets, and perhaps a spark of rebellion. Next to her, Sorel studied the human technology with quiet awe, sometimes placing her hand on the screen as if trying to feel the warmth of something she had not seen in centuries. Hope. Below deck, engineers worked alongside Valari technicians to link their energy systems, trying to combine the ancient harmonic tech of the Valari with human systems. The hybrid tech could boost shields, power weapons, maybe even cloak the ship, but it was risky, untested, and fragile. Rourke knew they had little time before the Karnax responded again. The Valari presence on the Dauntless had made the ship a target, and Earth Command still refused to send backup, choosing silence over action. Suddenly, a ping on the scanner broke the silence. A Karnax cruiser had entered the edge of the system, heading their way fast. Rourke called Red Alert. The Valari on board fell quiet. They had seen this pattern before, first one ship, then many. But Rourke had no intention of running this time. She ordered the Dauntless to shift course toward a nearby asteroid field. It was dangerous, full of sharp rock and gravity pockets, but it would buy them time and give them cover. The ship moved quickly, slipping between tumbling stones and debris. The Karnax vessel followed, slow and precise, scanning for weaknesses. Rourke watched the tactical screen, her mind racing. They couldn't outrun the enemy, not in this part of space, not with the refugees aboard. She needed a plan. That's when Sorel stepped forward and showed her a device. The Valari called it the Pulse Beacon, a small orb that could broadcast a signal across light years. If they could power it through the Dauntless's core, it could send a message across human and alien space in a matter of minutes, telling the truth about the Karnax attacks and calling for help. But doing so would drain nearly all of the ship's energy for a short time, leaving them vulnerable. Rourke hesitated. It was a gamble, but it might be the only chance they had to shift the tide. As the Karnax ship fired warning shots near the asteroids, Rourke gave the order. The Valari and human engineers rushed to connect the beacon. Lights flickered, Systems dipped. Shields weakened. The beacon pulsed once, then again, and then shot a wave of light into the stars. A silent scream from a ship alone in the dark. The Karnak's captain, receiving no response from Earth, began to close in. They broadcast a message: surrender the Valari or be destroyed. Rourke responded firmly. She would not surrender anyone. If the Karnaks wanted to test humanity's resolve, they had just found the wrong captain. The battle began. The Dauntless used the asteroid field to its advantage, weaving between rock and shadow. Valari tech created energy mirrors, confusing enemy sensors. Human gunners fired precision blasts, targeting weapons instead of engines, trying to disable rather than destroy. The ship shook under the strain. Sparks flew in engineering. One of the stabilizers went offline. But they kept moving, fighting not for victory, but for time. Then, just when the situation looked hopeless, a new signal appeared on the long-range scanner. A human ship, then 2, then 5. Independent vessels, captains from Earth and the Eye colonies, had heard the beacon and come. Some were old military ships, some converted cargo haulers, all ready to stand beside the Dauntless. The Karnak's cruiser paused, sensing the shift, then opened fire again, more aggressive this time. The Dauntless and its allies formed a loose wall in space, returning fire in a synchronized pattern, forcing the enemy to retreat behind the asteroid belt. The battle was not won, but it was not lost either. And for the first time, the Karnaks realized humanity was not just a bystander. They were now a line in the void, a line that would not break. After the fight, Rourke walked the halls of her ship, nodding to tired but proud crew members, watching Cyril and her people assist in repairs, blending into the life of the ship, like old friends. Messages from other human captains poured in, asking for updates, requesting to join the mission, offering supplies and escort. Rourke smiled quietly. The signal had worked. Humanity had listened. She knew more battles were ahead, harder and deadlier ones, but something had changed. No longer a lone voice in the dark. They were now many, connected by choice, not fear. The Valari had allies again. As the Dauntless prepared to leave the asteroid field, heading toward the next set of coordinates in the Valari archive, the stars ahead no longer seemed empty. Behind them, a shadow gathered, deep and ancient, as the Karnak's High Command reviewed the reports. They had underestimated the humans. That mistake would not happen again. Fleet movements began. Old weapons were pulled from storage. The next encounter would not be a warning. But for now, in the quiet moment after fire and fury, the Dauntless flew forward, a ship once meant to explore, now destined to defend. And somewhere deep inside its hull, the Valari beacon continued to pulse, its light reaching farther than anyone had ever dared to believe. The Dauntless soared through the dark between systems, escorted now by a growing group of ships flying under no single flag but one shared cause, defending the forgotten, standing for the voiceless, and proving that humanity would not sit still while the Karnaks hunted the Valari into extinction. On board, the atmosphere had changed. Crew members once weary and wary were now energized, working alongside Valari engineers as if they had always been allies. The mixing of human and Valari technology had brought surprising results: stronger shields, faster repair times, and even communication systems that could stretch across strange pockets of space where normal signals vanished. Commander Elena Rourke walked the bridge with quiet pride, but carried a weight in her chest she would not show. They were still hunted, and the Karnaks would not ignore their resistance for long. Their next destination was a drifting space colony called Nerilia, once a Valari science outpost, now lost to silence after a Karnaks raid many years ago. Cyril believed survivors could still exist deep within its protective rings, and Rourke had promised to check every last place, no matter the risk. As the fleet dropped into real space near the colony's location, they found the debris first: shattered defense satellites and burnt ships, the remains of a desperate stand. But at the center of it all, still turning slowly, was Nerilia, a massive station surrounded by thick rings of ice, dust, and metal, its core lights barely glowing. They approached carefully, scanning for life signs and traps, their ships hidden behind one of the thicker ice rings. A faint signal echoed from the station, repeating, broken, but clearly Valari. Sorel's eyes filled with hope. Rourke gave the order to dock. A small team boarded, their steps slow and careful through silent halls that smelled of dust and power. Loss. The inside of the station was a graveyard of memory. Rooms filled with frozen plants, labs full of shattered glass, and murals showing the Valari's vision of peace and knowledge now faded by time. Then, a door opened. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, half covered in a strange kind of armor, eyes flickering with faint light. He held up a hand in warning, but did not attack. He spoke slowly, voice hoarse. His name was Kalen, a guardian who had remained behind when the station fell, keeping the last few survivors alive in deep stasis. He led them to the core chamber, where 6 cryopods stood around a failing generator. The people inside, still Valari, still alive, were pale and weak, but not lost. Rourke called in medics and engineers to stabilize the systems, while Kalen watched with cautious respect. He had not trusted humans, had barely believed in Surreal's dream, but seeing so many ships outside, human ships, made something shift in him. Meanwhile, back on the Dauntless, a message came through. Earth Command, at last, had responded. But instead of thanks or orders, it was a warning. The Karnaks were mobilizing. A full fleet had been spotted gathering near the Edgeward Belt, a direct line toward Nerilia and the other colonies. Earth Command said it could not guarantee protection. Withdraw, the message said. Preserve the ship. Avoid unnecessary conflict. Rourke stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. She gathered her officers and the leaders of the other ships, human and Valari alike, and held a meeting in the Dauntless's main conference room. The air was heavy. Some captains wanted to flee, others wanted to strike first. But Rourke stood at the center and reminded them why they had come, why they had answered the call of the beacon, not for glory, not for orders, but because they believed that turning away from those in need made them no better than the ones who hunted. Sorel spoke next, her voice quiet but full of power, saying that this moment right now was the chance to prove that peace could be defended, not just hoped for. Slowly, voices rose in agreement. Plans were drawn, defense grids were activated. Weapons were distributed. The Dauntless began running drills with Kalen's help, training volunteers from the rescued Valari and the civilian crews. Sparks flew in every corner of the station and fleet as systems came online. Weapons were modified, and people, human and alien, stood side by side, no longer just survivors, but defenders. Then the Karnaks arrived. 7 warships, dark and sharp, like blades, dropped out of warp and advanced with terrifying silence. No message, no warning, just movement. They surrounded the ice ring, scanning for weaknesses. Rourke ordered the fleet to hold position. As the Karnaks approached the main shield of Nerilia, Rourke sent one last message. We will not move. These people are under our protection. The Karnaks answered by firing on a relay station. The battle erupted in seconds, ships twisting. Between ice and metal, red beams cutting through the void, explosions lighting up the frozen ring. The Dauntless and her allies fought with everything they had. Valari defense drones, long dormant, were reactivated and surged into the fight. The hybrid weapons pulsed with harmonic energy, disrupting Karnak's targeting systems. Human fighters darted between the larger ships, drawing fire, buying time. Kalen led a team from the surface of Nerilia, launching plasma spears from hidden turrets. The sky above the station was fire and chaos, but neither side backed down. Then, a Karnak's battleship pierced the outer line and aimed for the core station. The Dauntless moved to intercept. Rourke gave the order for full burn, pushing the engines to their limit. The ship slammed into the enemy's path, shields flashing, and delivered a direct strike to its engines. Both ships spun, damaged, but the Karnak's vessel drifted off course and exploded moments later in a silent flash. The rest of the Karnak's ships, sensing the unity of the defenders and their unwillingness to break, pulled back. Not in defeat, but in re-evaluation. They had expected fear. Instead, they had found resistance. As the remaining enemy vessels vanished into the dark, a heavy silence fell. Slowly, ships reported damage, Injuries, losses, but also survival. Against all odds, they had held. Sparks of unity, once small and scattered, had become a flame. Rourke looked around the bridge and saw a crew exhausted but smiling, Valari and humans working side by side to repair systems, share water, and rest for the next challenge. Outside, the ice rings of Nerilia continued to turn, now lit by the glowing lights of the defenders who had made it home again. In the days that followed, more ships arrived, not military, but independent, drawn by the beacon and the story of the battle. Messages of support trickled in, from Mars colonies, from deep space miners, even from hidden research stations once too afraid to speak. A movement was forming, not led by governments, but by people who chose to care. Rourke knew it wouldn't be enough to win the war, not yet. But it was a beginning, and sometimes beginnings were all the universe needed. The darkness beyond Nerilia had grown heavier, and though the stars still shone, there was a weight in the space between them that every soul aboard the Dauntless could feel, as if the universe itself held its breath before a storm. After the battle and the victory at Nerilia, hope had spread quickly, but so had fear, because deep inside, everyone knew the Karnax would not retreat forever. They would regroup, they would remember, and they would respond. Commander Elena. Rourke stood at the main viewport of the bridge, staring at the empty space where enemy ships had vanished just days earlier, her eyes hard, her thoughts racing. Repairs had gone well. The Valari survivors were recovering, and more human ships continued to arrive. Volunteers, engineers, freighter captains bringing supplies, even a few small science vessels offering scanners and tech support. But something was wrong, and everyone felt it. Kalen, the armored Valari guardian, confirmed it through a series of decoded signals picked up by the hybrid communication system. Static whispers and fragmented transmissions from deep Karnak space, layered and strange. But one thing was clear. A larger force was moving, a fleet unlike anything seen before. Older, more dangerous, drawn not only by the beacon but by what the Karnak saw as a betrayal. Humanity had chosen to fight beside their ancient enemy. The Karnaks, once methodical and cold, were now angry, and that made them unpredictable. Rourke called a full meeting of all captains and key Valari leaders aboard the station and ships. In the command hall of Nerilia, a map of the sector flickered in the center, showing dots of light moving slowly toward their position. "We have days, maybe less," she said, her voice calm but firm. "And this time, they're not just testing us, they're coming to end it." Surreal stood beside her, silent but determined, her people no longer the last breath of a dying race, but survivors, rebuilding their pride. Kalen stepped forward with an idea born of desperation and courage. He spoke of a lost Valari weapon hidden within the ruins of an ancient world called Halor Prime, a place sealed off long ago after a failed peace attempt between the Valari and the Karnaks. It was said to house the core of an energy engine capable of powering a planetary shield or disabling an entire fleet for minutes, but no one had dared approach it in generations. Rourke saw only one option. They had to retrieve the device. She gathered a team quickly, mixing human marines, Valari scouts, and Kalen himself, and boarded a small stealth ship called the Sparrow, leaving command of the defense fleet to her second officer while she slipped into the unknown once again. Halor Prime was a dead planet wrapped in storm clouds and broken satellites, the remains of long-lost battles drifting in pieces around it. As they entered orbit, systems flickered from interference, and the planet itself seemed to groan, its surface a maze of broken towers, shattered stone, and rusted machines. They landed in a deep canyon near a structure shaped like a cracked sphere, old Valari design marked with faded glyphs and burn scars. The team spread out, scanning and watching as Sorel read the symbols aloud, guiding them deeper inside. Traps still functioned. Twice they had to dive aside as collapsing walls or bursts of energy tried to stop them. But Kalen moved with certainty, as if he had studied this place in his mind for centuries. Deep in the structure, past an old council chamber full of broken statues, they found the device, a glowing orb held within a cage of crystal and metal, humming with restrained power. But as they approached, something stirred. Guardians, not like Kalen, but ancient Valari machines corrupted by time and war, activated and rose from the walls, sleek, fast, and silent, their weapons crackling with blue fire. The team fought hard, using human rifles and Valari staffs, in combination, covering one another, but the Guardians would not stop. Rourke made a split-second choice. She and Kalen would hold the chamber while Surreal and the others pulled the orb free and ran for the ship. Outside, storm winds howled, and lightning danced across the sky. The Sparrow lifted just as the last Guardian fell, and the structure collapsed behind them. Rourke was wounded, her arm burnt and her shoulder dislocated, but she held the orb tightly as they escaped Halar Prime. Back at Nerilia, the device was rushed into engineering, and within hours, Valari and human scientists worked together to link it with the defense grid. The plan was simple and desperate. When the Karnax arrived, they would lure their ships into a tight formation and then activate the pulse, giving the defenders a short window to strike or force a retreat. But when the Karnax came, they came, with more than ships. Massive carriers opened in orbit, releasing a swarm of drone fighters, and strange dark pods landed on the moon nearby, unleashing Karnax ground units unlike anything seen before. Taller, more armored, glowing with pulsing energy veins. The battle was not a single moment, but waves of chaos. In space, ships spun and fired, dodging through firestorms. On the ground, Marines and Valari warriors defended landing pads and shield generators, fighting hand-to-hand in frozen dust. Rourke, bandaged but refusing to rest, returned to the bridge of the Dauntless, guiding the fleet with clear orders and sharp timing. The orb, now installed at the heart of the station's shield core, pulsed and hummed, building energy. Then came the signal. The Karnax fleet began to form a spear pattern, ready to pierce the heart of the station. Rourke waited until the moment the enemy was closest, then gave the order. The orb activated, and for a heartbeat the world went still. A wave of energy rippled out, silent but blinding, and across the field, Karnax ships flickered and froze, weapons going dark, engines stalling. The defenders moved, every ship fired. Fighters broke ranks and struck at the core engines. Valari drones exploded in formation, tearing holes in enemy hulls. Ground units collapsed as command signals vanished. The Karnax were stunned but not broken. One massive warship, somehow shielded from the pulse, powered forward, targeting the Dauntless. Rourke stared at the screen, heart pounding. They couldn't move in time. Then, a new ship appeared, sleek, golden, shaped like a spear of light. It was Valari, but not from Sorel's group. It fired a focused beam that split the Karnax ship in two, then broadcast a single word across all channels. Allied. A forgotten fleet, hidden for generations, had seen the beacon too, and returned. As the Karnax retreated once more, their numbers cut and their pride wounded, the defenders of Nerilia stood in silence, barely able to process what they had achieved. Rourke slumped into her chair, breathing hard, while Surreal and Kalen looked out at the stars with something close to peace. The war was far from over, but the response had been met with unity, courage, and fire. The line in the void still held, and beyond the stars, new allies stirred, drawn by the call of those who refused to be silent. In the quiet days that followed the battle, the station Nerilia no longer felt like a graveyard of the past. It had become something new, something alive, a meeting place for all who chose to fight not out of duty, but out of belief. And as ships from distant human colonies and hidden Valari enclaves arrived, each one brought more stories, more people, and more pieces of a legacy being rebuilt from ash and silence. Commander Elena Rourke stood at the edge of the main observation deck, looking out across a patchwork fleet made of mismatched hulls, salvaged parts, and glowing energy lines that pulsed with both human and alien touch. And beside her stood Surreal and Kalen, once strangers from a forgotten race, now leaders whose courage had lit the path forward. Yet beneath this new unity, tension still stirred. Scouts had reported movements along the Karnax borders, not of warships this time, but of massive constructs, shaped like spheres and moving slowly across systems, consuming matter and vanishing again. And no one could say for sure if these machines were tools, weapons, or something worse. In secret, messages from Earth Command had begun to shift as well, cautious at first, but now almost fearful, with whispers that the Karnax had reached out to human officials offering a truce that came with a price. Withdraw from Nerilia. Leave the Valari behind, and be spared the wrath of what was coming. Rourke knew the truth the moment she read the message. Peace offered by the Karnax was never real, only a trap hidden behind cold words and false mercy. And if Earth accepted, it would mean abandoning not just allies but honor. She said nothing to the fleet at first, needing time, needing to know what kind of future they were truly building. And it was Kalen who offered the answer, not with a speech, but with an ancient Valari artifact retrieved from the depths of Hylar Prime, a stone tablet that shimmered with encoded light, a legacy record known as the Path Core, said to activate only in the presence of those who had earned the right to carry forward the Valari name. When brought into the main chamber of Nerilia and placed upon the central console, the Path Core glowed and played a vision of Valari history. Worlds lost, alliances broken, the first Karnax betrayal, and finally, the long silence that followed. Their retreat. Then the vision shifted to show the present, the faces of Rourke, Surreal, and Kalen, standing before a gathered assembly of both species, and a voice spoke, not in command, but in offering. Those who fight not for power, but for life shall carry the flame of the first light. Choose your legacy. The chamber fell silent as the projection faded, and no one spoke until Rourke stepped forward and touched the tablet again. Her voice was steady, carrying through the halls, through every ship and comm channel across the fleet. We choose each other. We choose not to run. We choose to build something worth defending. Let this legacy begin now. The fleet responded with a single signal, echoed ship by ship, a starburst symbol, glowing blue and gold, combining human and Valari design, a flag of unity not created by governments but by those who stood the line when others would have fled. But not all accepted this path. A few captains broke away, fearful of retaliation, choosing to return to Earth space. The rest stayed, knowing the price could be high, knowing the Karnax would not wait long. And indeed, they did not. Days later, the edge of the system flickered with movement. One of the great Karnax constructs arrived, a sphere larger than any known ship, covered in dark plates and glowing veins of red, its core pulsing like a heart. It made no attack. Instead, it released a probe, a small object that entered the station's airspace and landed softly on the central platform. Rourke, Surreal, and Kalen approached it with caution, and from within the probe came a message, not visual, but sound, a voice that was not Karnax, not machine, but strangely human. It spoke slowly, each word deliberate. We are the echo. We are the remainder of those consumed. The Karnax dig deep. They awaken the wound, flee, or join the silence. Then the probe crumbled to dust, and the great sphere vanished in a burst of light, leaving confusion and fear in its wake. The name echoed through every ship. Echo. What did it mean? Was it a warning or a threat? The Valari had never heard of such a thing, and the human databases had no record. But Sorel had a theory, one rooted in old myths, stories of an ancient force that the Karnax once feared, that they tried to trap beneath dead worlds, a force that fed on war and memory. She believed the Karnax were not just attacking, they were running from something. Rourke listened carefully, then turned to her people and said only one thing. If this wound wakes, we won't survive alone. The days that followed were filled with work. Alliances formed quickly, new plans drawn up, ships sent to distant systems to warn others, to recruit more defenders. A new command center was built within the station's core, powered by the energy of the recovered Valari artifact, now called the Flameheart, and from there, the chosen legacy of the new alliance began to take shape. They called themselves the Lineborn, those who stood the line when all else fell, and their ships bore the mark of the first light. More Valari joined from lost colonies, humans from rogue fleets and abandoned outposts, and even species once silent now sent envoys to Nerilia. It was more than a defense, it was a beginning. Yet the tension never left, the threat never faded, and one night, as the stars shone brighter than usual and the air felt colder than it should, an alert rang through the fleet. A second Karnax construct had arrived, and this one did not wait. It opened fire on a nearby moon, vaporizing a colony base that had been unarmed. There were no survivors. The Dauntless launched immediately, joined by the largest force yet assembled under the new alliance, and the battle that followed was like nothing they had seen. Gravity bent, time warped, and some weapons simply ceased to function as the construct distorted reality around it. But the Flameheart pulsed with strange energy, and when linked with the shield network, it created a pulse that cleared the distortion for moments at a time. In those windows, the Lineborn struck hard, cutting deep into the construct's shell until it cracked open, releasing a shockwave of light and sound that knocked out every system in the sector. When power returned, the construct was gone, and in its place was a single glowing shard floating silently. It was retrieved and placed beside the path core, and together they hummed with harmony, as if two broken songs had begun to sing again. Surreal placed her hand on the shard and said softly, "This was never just about war. This was about remembrance." Rourke nodded, looking at the gathered captains and warriors, human and Valari alike, their faces lit by the glow of the two relics. "Then we remember together," she said. And from that moment, the chosen legacy was no longer just an idea. It was a promise, made across stars and species, to stand as one not because it was easy, but because it was right. They did not know if the Karnax would return in greater force. They did not know if the wound, whatever it was, would rise. But they knew who they were now. And that would have to be enough. For in the silence of the stars, a new sound had begun to echo, not of fear, but of unity, not of retreat, but of resolve. And that sound, once small, now carried across the void like a song long forgotten, waiting to be heard again.